They say you remember moments, not days. And I remember that moment like it's stitched into my skin. My father stood at the head of the table, raising his glass, under soft string lights. Everyone leaned in already, grinning already, waiting for the applause. And then he said it. I'm proud of all my kids. Accept the failure at this table. Just like that, no hesitation, no punchline, no wink to soften the blow. The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It was sharp, satisfied. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just folded my napkin slowly, neatly, the way he taught me to when I was 12, like everything in life should be tidy. But that night I wasn't folding for him. I had come back for something. And what I brought with me would flip more than just the table. The wine glasses caught the light just right, golden, shimmering, blinding like everything in this house. Every surface polished, every napkin folded with military precision. The Father's Day dinner table looked like a catalog spread. And I looked like I didn't belong. Dad stood at the head of the table lifting his glass. His smile was easy, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. Around him, my brothers leaned back in their seats. Brandon with his sun-kissed smugness. Kyle already half a drink and tapping his fork on his plate. I just want to say, Dad began. I'm proud of all my kids. He paused, dramatic performative. I knew that pause. It was the setup. He liked his praise like he liked his business deals, theatrical and public. Brandon, he said. Raising his glass, you've turned the high school athletic program around. Coach of the year, that's no small feat. Ha, Brandon grinned. The applause started. Kyle, he continued, you've kept the Evans family name alive in the company. Your work with the new warehouse system. I couldn't have done it better myself. Kyle smirked and tipped his glass. More nods, more laughter. Then he turned to me, and the room went still. Dad tilted his head lightly, eyes skimming over me like I was another piece of furniture. His voice didn't change, but his words sliced cleaner than any knife on the table. And Claire, He lifted his glass higher, smile widening. I'm proud of all my kids, except the failure at this table. The laughter exploded like a dropped glass. Brandon's shoulders shook as he tried to suppress a chuckle. Kyle snorted into his drink. Even Aunt Lila let out a sharp exhale, like she wasn't sure if it was a joke, but didn't want to be left out. I didn't laugh. I didn't move. I just blinked once, slow, steady, and reached for my napkin. The same cloth napkin I'd folded at age 12 the first time. Dad made me set the table while my brothers played outside. The toast burned hotter than the wine in my throat. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I just smiled. Not for them, for me, because tonight I wasn't here to belong. I was here to end something and begin something else. People say every child remembers the moment they realized they were different. For me, it wasn't a moment. It was a pattern stitched into birthdays, report cards, and dinner conversations like invisible thread. Growing up in the Evans house meant earning your place at the table. And by earning, I mean playing by my father's rules. Brandon threw his first baseball at 3 and was declared a natural. Kyle built a cardboard fort at 5 and Dad called it engineering potential. I brought home a sketch I drew of our backyard at 7. He glanced at it and said, maybe try something useful next time, hun. Useful, that was his word. He measured everything people love, respect, by utility. And I never quite made the cut. I wasn't loud, I wasn't athletic, I wasn't the heir to the Evans hardware dynasty. I liked quiet books and colder mornings, and I asked too many questions at the dinner table. That alone earned me a lecture at 10 about knowing when to speak and when to listen. I listened too well, maybe. I watched as Brandon broke a window and was forgiven before the glass even hit the floor. I saw Kyle get caught skipping school and still walk into a new bike a week later. Meanwhile, I once forgot to water Mom's plants while she was away, and Dad didn't speak to me for 2 days. Mom tried, she really did. She snuck me chocolate during chores, wrote sticky notes that said things like, I see you and don't shrink. But even her softness couldn't buffer the weight of being invisible to the one man whose approval shaped the air we breathed. In high school, I got accepted into a STEM summer program across the country, full scholarship. When I told Dad, he said, "Are you sure you can handle it?" Brandon failed algebra twice that year and still got a car for his birthday. By college, the message was clear. I wasn't part of the family plan. Not the business, not the legacy, not the dinner table politics. But it wasn't just that I didn't belong. It's that I was never chosen. Brandon was the firstborn. Kyle was the protege. I was the backup plan no one planned for. The thing about being overlooked for so long is eventually you stop waiting for an invitation. You build your own door. And one day, if you're patient enough, you build your own table. The Evans name meant something in Asheville. Not nationally, not globally, but locally it held weight. Dad built Evans Hardware from a dusty supply shed into the region's go-to vendor for construction tools, farming equipment, and wholesale parts. Contractors knew him. City planners nodded when he walked into meetings. He donated to football teams and got his name on the banners. In his world, reputation was currency, and he made sure we understood that from day one. Family is business, he used to say, and business stays in the family. That motto wrapped itself around every birthday holiday and Sunday brunch like a silent contract. Even our Christmas cards were branded matching outfits, with the Evans logo stitched on the sleeve. Brandon bought in early. He wore Evans polos before he could spell his last name. Kyle followed suit, working summers in the warehouse before he turned 16. Dad praised their loyalty as if it was earned, not inherited. And me, I wasn't disloyal. I just didn't fit. I asked why we didn't stock sustainable tools. I suggested investing in digital systems for rural clients. I brought up environmental impact reports and was told, "That's not our lane." The truth, I had ideas, big ones. But the brand didn't want ideas from me. It wanted silence. When I turned 22, fresh out of college with honors and a minor in information systems, Dad handed me a clipboard and told me I could help file invoices in the back. Brandon was already in sales meetings. Kyle was shadowing logistics managers. I was stapling paper while pretending I couldn't hear their laughter through the wall. That was the last time I wore an Evans shirt. I walked out that day with nothing, no job title, no handshake, not even a goodbye. But I remember standing in the parking lot, looking up at the faded red and white sign over the warehouse and thinking, if the name won't make room for me, I'll make a name of my own. No applause, no witnesses, just me, a blank notebook, and the first sketch of something I didn't yet have the courage to call a company. Yet, leaving wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting match, no packed suitcase on the front porch. Just a quiet Tuesday afternoon when I didn't show up for inventory duty. And no one asked why. I moved into one-bedroom unit on the edge of town, past the highway where the road signs stopped pointing toward anything familiar. It smelled like old paint and possibility. No furniture except a mattress on the floor and a coffee table I dragged from a curb. And for the first time in my life, the silence around me didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. No dad checking up. No Kyle texting updates from the office. No mom asking if I'd stop by for dinner just to keep the peace. I didn't want peace anymore. I wanted distance. The first few weeks were ugly. I worked late nights coding freelance projects for local clinics just to make rent. I'd write until my hands cramped and I could feel the muscles in my jaw locking from clenching. I ate canned soup and cereal. Some nights I cried in the shower so my laptop wouldn't hear me. But pain was familiar, and at least now it was mine. What I didn't expect was how free it felt to fail on my own terms. Every time I got rejected by a client, a grant, a pitch, I didn't hear Dad's voice. I heard my own, try again. It wasn't bravery. It was necessity. Because when no one's watching you, there's no pressure to impress. There's just the work. And slowly the work became something more. I started noticing patterns in the problems small clinics were facing: scheduling gaps, communication failures, bad data tracking. The kind of inefficiencies that could collapse rural care systems if someone didn't fix them. Someone. I wrote down that word and circled it. And then I circled it again. The company didn't start with funding or buzz. It started with a quiet decision I would be the someone. And not to prove anything to my father, but because I'd finally stopped waiting for him to see me and started seeing myself. The first version of the platform was held together with duct tape and desperation. I called it Rural Link, a scheduling and records tool for small town clinics. No frills, no flashy graphics, just clean usable code and a simple mission. Make care easier for people no one was building for. I built it at night after finishing my freelance gigs. Coffee turned cold before I drank it. My posture collapsed over the laptop. I didn't notice. There were no meetings, no brainstorms. Just me, a whiteboard, and a folding chair I stole from the break room of a place that never paid me. It was lonely work. No co-founder, no college friend to cheer me on, no mentor dropping life-changing advice over coffee. Just bugs in my code and bills on my fridge. Some nights I'd get stuck hours lost trying to fix a silent error. I'd curl up on the floor with a blanket and tell myself 5 hours ago, you thought this was impossible too. Then I'd get back up. That became the rhythm. Despair, doubt, try again. I applied for accelerators, ignored, applied again. Cold emailed advisors, ghosted. I pitched to clinics, some never replied. One told me I was too early to take seriously. Another said I should get a man on the team to help with credibility. I didn't argue. I built anyway. The first clinic to say yes was a mobile van service that rotated through Appalachian towns twice a week. They had no internet signal half the time and no budget for tech. I charged them nothing. I wanted proof it worked. And it did. By month 2, they'd shaved 9 hours of admin time. By month 4, they were tracking medication errors in real time. They started referring me. Word spread, but not fast enough. So I took on more freelance work. I skipped holidays. I didn't go home. I didn't want to hear how Brandon's coaching career was on fire, or how Kyle just got promoted to COO. Let them have the table. I was building something better. It didn't come with applause, but it came with clarity, and brick by quiet brick, I kept going. The shift didn't happen all at once. It came quietly like most important things do, in the form of a late-night email from a clinic in West Virginia. We heard what you did for the mobile unit in Nashville. Would you consider expanding to us? That was the first crack in the wall. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even reply right away. I sat there blinking at the screen, unsure if it was a mistake. But when I finally said yes and they followed with a second clinic, then a third, I realized something I hadn't dared to believe. People were talking about me, about my work. Not because I was someone's daughter or sister or an Evans, but because what I built worked. Within 6 months, Rural Link was in 12 locations across 3 states. Not big, not flashy, but real. I brought on 2 part-time developers, both women I'd met in online coding forums, both underestimated like I'd been. We called ourselves a team, even when we still worked out of our kitchens. Then came Eli Mercado, a former health systems analyst turned investor. He had been following our progress quietly for months. When we finally spoke, he said, "You built something sustainable, not trendy, not loud, but solid, and solid scales." I remember laughing not out of joy, but out of relief. Someone saw it, saw me. He didn't throw around buzzwords. He didn't ask to rebrand. He simply said, if you want to grow, I'll help. No spotlight, no conditions. Just equity, clean and fair. I took the deal, but I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not old classmates. Definitely not the family group chat that still buzzed with Brandon's game wins and Kyle's company milestones. Let them keep assuming I was finding myself somewhere on the outskirts of life. The truth, I was building an ecosystem they'd never think to look for. Eli introduced me to acquisition lawyers. He taught me how to evaluate undervalued firms. He taught me how to look for cracks in companies and leadership and egos, too bloated to see decline coming. One day we sat in a quiet office above a bakery downtown, scrolling through candidate firms. He paused on one. Evans Regional Supply. I said nothing. He raised an eyebrow. This one's undervalued. Outdated systems. Too much overhead. Leadership's old school. He didn't know it was my father's company, and I didn't tell him. I just said, keep that one bookmarked. The purchase wasn't emotional. That's what made me sit powerful. It happened on a Thursday morning over espresso in a glass-walled office 2 counties over. The lawyers handled everything. Shell company, silent buyout, no names on paper that would catch my father's attention. When the signatures dried, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like the moment before sunrise when everything's still but the light is coming. Evans Regional Supply was mine. The inventory, the warehouses, the accounts. Even the main office where Kyle had just been promoted. The company Dad built, guarded, and passed down like a family heirloom was now under my ownership. He didn't know, he wouldn't not until I told him, and I knew exactly when that moment would be. Father's Day. 2 weeks out, I sent a message in the family group chat. The first one in over a year. I'll be at dinners. Us. No emojis, no follow-up. Just that. The replies came slowly. A thumbs up from Mom. A wow long time from Brandon. And Kyle said nothing. Dad left it on scene. Perfect. The day before the dinner, I went shopping. Not for an outfit, though I chose one sharp enough to make silence feel like a weapon, but for the envelope. It had to be black. Not navy, not gray. Black with weight to the paper, a kind of quiet gravity. I slipped the ownership document inside, folded once, no ribbon, no bow. I slid it into my purse and rehearsed nothing, no speeches. No dramatic decorations. This wasn't theater. It was closure. The car I drove that night wasn't leased. It was fully paid for in my new name. Clara M. Harlow, my mother's maiden name. I'd taken it legally 6 months ago. Clean break. No more Evans. They wouldn't recognize it when they saw it on the paperwork. That was intentional. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I wasn't coming back to throw a tantrum at the table. I was coming back to flip it. The house looked exactly the same. Same white shutters, same overwatered lawn, same string lights Dad insisted on hanging for every holiday, including Father's Day. Through the kitchen window, I saw my brothers already gathered. Brandon wore a golf polo like he'd just stepped off a country club lawn. Kyle poured bourbon like he owned the bottle. Laughter rolled out through the open patio door. Low, easy, loud. Dad stood at the head of the patio table, drink in hand, telling a story I didn't care to hear. When I stepped through the gate, the sound dimmed, like the air itself paused. Well, Dad said with mock surprise, look who finally decided to show up. I smiled, cool, polite. Happy Father's Day. No hugs, just chairs scraping and eyes scanning. They hadn't seen me in over a year, and they didn't recognize what I'd become. Dinner was the usual script. Brandon bragged about coaching an all-state team. Kyle talked warehouse upgrades. Dad ate it up, beaming, nodding his glass, always half full. I didn't speak, not at first. Not until Dad, buoyed by bourbon and performance, stood and raised his glass. I'm proud of all my kids, he declared, just like the year before. Then with a grin too sharp to be kind, well, almost all. Brandon choked on a laugh. Kyle smirked. Even Mom winced, her eyes fixed on her plate. I stood, slow, calm. And I brought you something, I said. 3 words. That's all. I walked to the kitchen, my heels steady against the tile. When I returned, I laid the black envelope on the table directly in front of him. No words. He looked down at it like it might bite. What's this, your Father's Day gift? The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical, He peeled open the flap, unfolded the paper, eyes scanning. At first confusion, then stillness, then the color drained from his face. What is this? Brandon leaned over to peek. Wait, is that real? Kyle grabbed the edge of the page. Is this legal? I didn't answer. I let the paper do it for me. Finally, Dad looked up, his voice hoarse. You bought the company? No, I said. I own the company. Fucking. You can't, I did. And you changed your name. I built something without you. And then I took back what I helped build silently, legally, completely. They stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. But it was the same language they'd always used, just never expected from me. Power. Dad opened his mouth again, but this time, nothing came out. Because it wasn't just a document. It was a declaration. The table he once ruled had turned. And I wasn't asking for a seat anymore. I had the deed. I didn't stay for dessert. I didn't need to hear the excuses, the backpedaling, the fumbling for grace. I'd already given them everything. I never got clarity, silence, and the truth. When I stepped out into the night, the air felt lighter. Not because anything had changed in that house, but because everything had changed in me. I'd stopped chasing a seat at a table that was never built for me, and instead I built one of my own. My table didn't come with monogrammed napkins or family crests. It came with night shifts, rejection emails, and lines of code no one else wanted to write. It came with scraped knees, tight budgets, and decisions no one clapped for. But it was mine, every inch. I didn't need my father's name. I didn't need my brother's approval. I didn't need anyone to raise a glass for me, because I wasn't waiting to be toasted. I was already building the next thing. And by the time my car eased away from the curb, the house faded in the rear view, just another silhouette under string lights. They'd spent weeks trying to understand what happened. Maybe longer trying to undo it. But it wouldn't matter, because I'd already stepped into a world they never imagined I'd belong to, though not by asking, not by pleading, but by becoming the kind of woman they could no longer ignore. I didn't burn the table. I outgrew it. And then I made one stronger, sturdier, and open only to those who knew how to listen when the quiet one speaks.